Welcome to the Black Men Rock Roundtable discussion, where our intention is to engage black men in a powerful, positive dialogue about issues and events that empower black men to live extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Coach Michael Taylor. In this episode, I'd like to ask the question, how important is spirituality in a man's life? Well, of course, talking about God and spirituality can sometimes be a heated and divisive topic. But our intention is not to try and convince you to accept any religion or philosophy. Our goal is to simply share our own experiences in hopes of providing you with some insights that will support you on your spiritual journey. So, at this time, I'd like to give my panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. So, let's begin with Russell. Russell, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Russell Richard. I am a therapist in practice here in Houston, and glad to be here with you. This is a topic that I discuss quite a bit, and it's actually one of my favorites. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
And Jonathan.
My name is Jonathan Oliver out of Temple, Texas. I'm a published author and a life coach and a presenter, and also looking forward to the other men opinion and feedback for the topic. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm curious to know how other men process that as well.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Arthur J. Johnson.
Yes, Arthur Johnson here in Houston, Texas. I am an author and speaker and life coach and minister and thought leader around the topic of spirituality and expressing one's own individual expression regarding their spiritual experience in life. And I'm happy to be here.
Great. So again, spirituality is one of those topics that can sometimes divide people, and that's not the intention of this episode. We don't want to divide. We want to bring men together. So if you're viewing this, just recognize that what we're going to be sharing are our own personal experiences with spirituality. We are not promoting any religion or saying that you need to go to church. We're going to share some insights that I hope will support you along your own spiritual journey. So I want to begin with a question for the panelists, and I'll start with you, Arthur. Mm-hmm. And I just want to know how would you describe or define God?
Interesting question, Mike. Really, there is no definition for God. There is no description of God. I believe when we describe and define, we place limitations around that which is. And God is just that. He's love, He's energy, He's a presence that is with us at all times, and that's, as I would love to say, 100% present and equally distributed throughout the universe, meaning that God is everywhere, God is everything, and as the writer says, it's in God that we live and move and have our being. So there really is no separation from this essence that we call God. And where perhaps the divisiveness comes is when we tend to label it, and we put a label on it. And if the label that I use is not the label that you use, we now have a problem. But underneath, the essence is the same. And I think that's where we want to get to, is that essence, which is simply pure love.
Okay. Jonathan, how do you see God, Jonathan?
So that's a different question from how I see versus how I describe.
Yeah, how do you see? How do you see God?
I see God as my Lord and Savior. The reason that I'm able to have air in my lungs, to be able to have forgiveness, to be able to have mercy, to be able to have love, to be able to have grace. I see God as something that I'm in awe of, not to be as my friend, as my buddy, as my pal, but more as a fear out of respect, out of understanding the magnitude of the absent, if it was out of my life, what that would mean for me, which is so for me, it's really I describe him as a comforter, as a answer, as a savior, and as everything that gives me hope. Because if it wasn't for that, I would have, trust me from personal experience, I would have checked that a long time ago.
Okay. And Russell, complete this statement. God is
Everything. It's that simple. Yeah, everything around us is God and is of God. God is love. God is the creator. God is creator in creation. Yeah, the simplest and most concise way that in my conceptualization of God is that God is indeed everything, in everything and everything.
And so if I had to define God, I would use a definition that I learned from a gentleman named Andrew Cohen. And he defines God this way. He says, God is the energy and intelligence that created and is still creating the universe. And that really resonates with my spirit. That's if I have to define it, that's how I experience it. It's the energy and intelligence that created and is still creating the universe. And so now that we've shared our ideas about it, I want you guys to stop for a moment and try to recall what is your earliest experience that you can remember about God/religion. So think about that for a moment. What is your earliest remembrance of religion or God, and what was that experience like? And Russell, if you're ready, why don't you share that?
Interesting question. Experience of God and experience of religion. I don't know if those two are necessarily the same thing for me.
Okay.
I grew up in a little small Catholic town in Louisiana, and religion was all around me. We have 3 major Catholic centers in that one little town. My family, particularly my grandmother, was very connected to the nuns that were there and priests that were there. Grew up going to Catholic school from kindergarten on through high school. So, you know, I'm thinking back to going to Mass on Fridays at school. I'm thinking back, probably even before that, having these religious figures, if you will, at my grandmother's house, and being in the midst of that. I guess on a more, I don't know if I'd say personal level, but on a different level than, you know, going through all the Catholic rites and First Communion and that sort of thing. So for me, that started very early, very much kind of born into a scenario where religion was very predominant.
Okay. Jonathan, what's your first remembrance of, and if you can remember an age, put that in there too, if you can remember an age when you first had some sort of exposure, if you will, to religion and God.
Of course, to me, there's a big difference between religion and God.
Okay.
I feel religion can be one of the greatest adversaries to a relationship with God. So, for me, having a religion, in a sense, was probably around 6, 7.
Okay.
I can remember religion. Really experiencing God, in a sense, beyond religion, I've begun to experience that more as I gotten older.
Right.
As I gotten older. So I'll give you a perfect example. So today we're at church, and this is a perfect topic. We were talking about religion and Christianity, and it was very simple definition. Religion was, from my church, was this perspective: man reaching up to God. Christianity, God reaching down to man. Religion, man working as a means to gain God's favor. Christianity, God paying the price for our sins, salvation by grace. And last one, religion, man keeping rules, regulations, and tradition. Christianity, God releasing us from the bondage of giving us freedom. So for me, religion, at a very young age, 6, 7, was like, cross your T's, dot your I's, do this, you're gonna be all right. You make a mistake, cut out. This is what's gonna go down. And so as I've gotten older, I begin to experience truly like, oh, so this is what unconditional love looks like. This is what mercy looks like. This is what grace looks like. This is what choosing to give someone grace because I've experienced grace looks like. So it's a big difference for me personally.
Yeah, and so the point here, I just want you to try to recollect your earliest remembrances of religion / God / spirituality. So we're just trying to put you back in that mindset of when you were a kid. So Arthur, can you remember in your first experience of God, religion / spirituality?
Yes, Mike, and all of those are, I believe, 3 separate experiences or entities, if you will, for lack of a better term. And the reason being, I'll say, probably along the lines where I've been in church all my life. I mean, Mama took me to church, to Sunday school, to BTU, Sunday night service, Wednesday night service. So I grew up in a Baptist church, so that was the norm. As a babe, I was taken to church. This is just what we did. Now, at the age of 15, I got called to take a step, by God, into ministry, and I actually preached my first sermon at the age of 15. And if we wanted to call that a one-on-one experience of God, definitely it was, because it was God who initiated that, and I surrendered and followed that. Now, looking at spirituality or the spiritual experience versus religion and God. So God, as I gave my first expression concerning the description or the definition of God, God is all and is in all and is moving and expressing through all. So when we talk about spirituality and having a spiritual experience, well, religion can be another individual's experience, because religion tends to follow a set of rules or follow a set of dictates or doctrine that one is to follow. And I believe spirituality is your experience of the divine. So it's not perhaps the way the rector says to do it or the pastor says to do it, but I have my own personal experience and relationship with the God of my understanding, and that's not dictated for me. I enter into that. That is revealed to me. I become one with that, and I think that's the spiritual experience. And I think for me, that has been the next evolutionary step of my walk with God, because I was, as I said, reared in the church, and I have seminary training, Baptist seminary training, and now I'm on a much more expanded path, I would say, of the essence of God and the expression of God through me, in me, and as me.
Yeah, and that's where we're leading to. So I wanted to share my first experiences of God, per se. I remember when I was about 10, getting baptized for the first time. and I was raised Baptist. And at 10 years old, I remember being absolutely terrified about going up in that pool to be baptized. I mean, it literally traumatized me because at 10 years old now, my little 10-year-old brain was going in a lot of different directions. First of all, I was concerned that, you know, I had picked up that I was a sinner, and I knew that I was being baptized, but in my little 10-year-old brain, I was thinking, okay, so all the bad things that I've done as a kid, what happens if the minister holds me underwater too long and I drown? I remember having these thoughts at 10 years old. And so my first experience of God, if you will, at that age was one of fear, absolute terror. And so I wanted to challenge you to kind of think about your first experience with God / religion to lead up to the next question, which is, do you hold the same beliefs about God now that you did when you were younger? So, Arthur, you've kind of answered that question. Russell, I know where you're going to go with, but I want to start with Jonathan. And you shared from approximately 6 years old. So my question to you is, your first experience at, say, 6 or so that you mentioned, do you still hold those same beliefs about God that you did then?
No, I don't.
Okay.
My first belief was all about, I would almost use the mentality like an Old Testament belief. It was, you mess up, you're going to hell. I never got the coming off the cross and have an opportunity for eternal life. I put you on the cross. So it was very much a fear base of, if you make a mistake, you mess up, you're sin, or you're this. So my whole mindset for me personally has always been, up until about, I would say, 18 months ago, and I'm 35, my whole mindset has been trying to prove to God that I wasn't who He thought or said that I was.
Okay.
So I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna be the best. I'm gonna prove. I'm gonna earn. I'm gonna do all this stuff. Now I finally, at 35, 18 months ago, and now older, have reached, I'm exactly who God said I was, and that's okay, because I don't have to prove anything. All I have to do is just acknowledge, apart from Him, I'm exactly who you said I was, and now I can experience, like, really love and unconditional and like a piece of comfort and like growth. So a lot of that have come from experiences to get to that point. So yeah, big difference from 6, of being afraid and like, oh, if I step on the eggshell, I'm gonna get, it's gonna be trouble bad, to now, you know what, I can make mistakes. Not to say that those don't have consequences, but I'm not a bad person. I am a bad person, but that doesn't surprise God. All I need to do is accept His love.
Okay. So Arthur, you began elaborating a little bit. So once again, I asked the question, thinking about your first experiences, you were called into ministry at 15.
Mm-hmm.
So you felt the call of Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, as a grown man, are your beliefs different than when you were called at 15?
Yes, my beliefs are different. They're very different. Because even leading up to 15 and being called into ministry, I still had beliefs that were taught to me. If I could use the analogy of a computer, that was the program that was written by another programmer that was not myself. Because I came here knowing nothing. So whatever I knew of God, it was input into me, and that was the output. And as I grew, I began to think. And when I began to think, I began to think about what I had been taught. and what I had been taught did not align with who I was becoming. So yes, I had my own personal struggle, because as I love to say, sometimes we have to do some unlearning, because everything we learned was really not perhaps best for us for where we are at that point in time in life. So as I began to think, I began to develop my own beliefs of what resonated with me and what was true for me. So as I developed those beliefs, I understood who I was in God and who God was in me, and that I was an expression of God. So when God sees me, God sees himself. Now, yes, I may make a mistake. I may have an error in judgment, but I'm not judged by that. Now, a consequence? Yes, that's the natural law. We have cause and effect. I'm responsible for that. But I do know that I have an essence that's within me, that's around me, that's for my good, and that I can always seek that essence, that guidance, that wisdom to get back on the right path. But I'm still becoming all that my Creator destined for me to be in the very beginning. So now I like to have my beliefs to line up with what's true for me, and not what was true for mama, not what was true for the pastor that baptized me, not that was true for the pastor that ordained me, not that was true for my professors in seminary school, because that perhaps was their experience. But my experience sets me free so that I can be the original, unique essence of God that he destined me to be when I was birthed over 44 years ago. That's it. So my beliefs are totally different. And they're still growing. They're still expanding, because there is no limit to God. Right. There is no limit to God. And as you indicated, that, hey, don't let me get on my soapbox over here preaching, but as you said, that God is still creating, and he's creating through you and me, and Russell, and Jonathan, and every other man that we want to touch, if we allow him to create through us. But the creation will take place.
Got it. So Russell brought up in that, I'll use the term, and this is just my judgment, rigid Catholic upbringing. I'm sure you were, as Arthur said, programmed with that. So how is your thought process is different now than when you were experiencing that belief system?
Well, yeah, it's very different in terms of, again, ideas about God and ideas about religion, which, again, as we've been talking about, can be two very different things. Certainly my ideas about religion has changed, and I don't really subscribe to the Catholic tradition. Of course, there's truth in all traditions that make sense, at least to me. And actually, growing up in the Catholic tradition taught me a lot of really good stuff that I still adhere and live by today, particularly in this whole notion of Jesus and what Jesus was all about, and the concepts of love and forgiveness and compassion. I must say that when I look back on my experience growing up Catholic, that was what I got in terms of who Jesus was and what Jesus was about, more so than other ideas that Christians have about Jesus and Christ. As far as God, and as you said, you probably know where I'm going with this, I think as children we all have this idea, well, not just as children, but we have this idea of God as a person. And that, to me, was the biggest shift away from my childhood notions of God, is that God is not human. And I think we often fall in the trap of trying to limit God as being one of us. And I think the reason why we do that is because we have no other point of reference. So, so naturally, we're going to project onto this being, the creator, God, if you will, all of our traits and attributes. But as has been said, God is so much bigger than that. You know, God has created this entire universe, and I would imagine most of us has seen the pictures from the Hubble telescope that shows how many billions of galaxies exist here. And you know, when you look at stuff like that, it really gives you an idea of the vastness of God. And that is not something any mere mortal human being is capable of. So that's the biggest shift for me, is taking all that is human off of God and realizing that, one, God is something I will never totally understand, but realizing that God is a force, God is an entity, God is energy, and I don't need to put parameters on that. You know, I don't need to clearly define it. I think one of the things that religion does for us as human beings is it gives us a sense of certainty, because none of us really know why we're here, and we've been thrown here, and it's kind of like, okay, so what do we do? How did I get here? You know, what do I do while I'm here? Who put me here? Where am I going when I leave? And I think religion gives us the answers to all those unanswerable questions, and it also helps us to define God. For some strange reason, as much certainty as I need in my life about everything else, I'm perfectly okay and comfortable being in the uncertainty of these unanswerable questions. So I guess kind of going around the block here, but getting back to your original question, the primary shift for me is taking these human traits off of God and realizing that God is something far greater than a human being.
Okay, so now I want you to think about this. So we talked about our first experiences, okay, with God, with religion. We talked about how those beliefs may have shifted. So I'm wondering if you men might be able to share an experience that may have caused you to rethink your beliefs about God. So take this moment and think about that, because I'll share my experience. Because after my divorce some 25 years ago, one of the things that I did to try to alleviate some of the pain that I was in was I decided to go back to church. And I hadn't been to church in a very, very long time. But again, my pain was driving me to find some relief. And so I went back to what I knew, which was being Baptist. And so I go back to church, and for a couple of weeks, it did alleviate that pain more psychologically, because I was no longer isolating myself. I was no longer just really depressed. It got me engaged with people. And so as I started going to church and started feeling a little better, if you will, I started asking myself some deeper questions, and they were the same questions that I actually had when I was about 10 years old. And those questions could not be answered by the minister in this particular church that I was going to. And he just wasn't ready or willing or capable of going there. And so I felt this disconnection. I felt this hypocrisy in going to church, because I didn't believe a lot of the stuff that they were teaching. And I actually became an atheist for several years, because I couldn't get my questions answered. And so after being an atheist for a few years, I started doing a lot of psychological and emotional healing and growing and getting involved with, you know, some healing modalities that helped me understand my behaviors and so forth. And as I started healing, the question popped up again. So, okay, so I'm feeling good about myself, and I actually began to sort of rationalize everything from the standpoint of, okay, so I've done inner child work, which helped me heal my childhood wounds. I'm healed that part of myself. I'm feeling good about myself, blah, 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 blah. And so then the question became, so what's next? And so as an atheist, there was no what's next. I didn't know where to go, and so I started asking myself that question again. And does God exist? And so, without going into a long spiel, I actually got involved with some New Thought teachings, and for the first time, I felt a connection to something bigger than myself, without labeling it, without being attached to any religious dogma or doctrine, and it helped me start finding my truth. And Arthur, I love how you mentioned the fact of the programming, because all of my programming of my youth didn't work for me. And that's why I rejected spirituality, God, altogether. But it wasn't until I started asking myself some deeper questions that I could find my truth. And so my divorce, bankruptcy, foreclosure, all those painful experiences, which led me to do my healing work, which led me to become an atheist, which then led me to find the truth of my own soul, has allowed me to feel a deep sense of connection to what I choose to call my source. So that's kind of how I got on this journey. So I'm wondering, men, if you could share an experience maybe that triggered you to shift your beliefs from what you were raised as a child to where you are today. And let's start with you, Russell.
I can't think of any particular experience. I've always been a thinker, and I guess the way that I rebelled was by questioning things. And I have a friend who on his email tagline, he has question everything. And that really kind of fits with who I am, because as a kid, you know, I was having these questions about the things that I was learning, and it just didn't add up. And so I can't say that was really one particular event. It was just more of my own sort of mental process around, as Arthur said, what was trying to be programmed in me. And I guess being the contrary person that I can be at times, you know, things just didn't make sense. So I just kind of have been on this journey throughout my life, really, of trying to make sense of religion, God, spirituality. And so, yeah, there was no real one event. It's just been an ongoing process of questioning and discovery for me.
Got it. Thanks. Arthur.
Yes, sir.
Any experience that may have triggered your transformation, or are you just kind of like Russell, just kind of evolved into a new way of thinking?
Well, definitely along the same lines of Russell, and I love when he said he's, you know, a thinker and began to kind of question everything, and so did I. And believe it or not, once again, as you all know, my history of being a minister and called into ministry and seminary training. I mean, this is what I was teaching. And what I was teaching, I was no longer settled with. So, as I shared with y'all, you know, I had this internal struggle, right? So much so that I couldn't understand how we had this loving God, and yet we were in such a dismal state, so to speak, and we were so damned, if you will, you know, by our actions, but yet we had this loving God. So, you know, not to say that we were serving this, you know, tyrannical, schizophrenic, judgmental God, but it was kind of that way, and it was always, as Christian, as believers, we were in this fight. You know, we were in this struggle. And we were fighting this evil one and this enemy. And on one hand, we're taught and we shout we're more than conquerors, you know, in Christ, and you know, He causes us to triumph. But then on one hand, we're being defeated by this enemy, by this devil. And I'm like, okay, so which is it? And you know, do I ever win? So I began to go on this search, because I once again was just embracing this larger essence of God than what I was actually receiving and even purporting. So as my truth began to unfold, well, it allowed me to perhaps challenge what I was hearing and even perhaps what I was sharing. And in order to be true with myself, um, I had to see, okay, Arthur, what's true for you? And what are you going to stand on and stand for? So that was kind of my experience, and just challenging what I had learned, and the status quo, and perhaps what the dominant teaching was. And truly, we're on a path of new thought, and we really think about it. It's not really new. It's called new thought, but it's really just that. It's thought. It's a process of thinking. And when we're told, let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, well, what kind of mind was that? And I think when we can grasp that, and that same mind is within us, but yet we have to become one with it. And that takes courage, because that's not everybody's thought, to
Right.
really have that mind and to allow that mind to be fluid in their life experience.
Mm. Got it. Got it. Jonathan, so how did you make your transition from thinking one way to thinking the way you do now?
Um,
Or have you changed your thinking? Maybe you have.
I definitely have changed my thinking process, and other Russell and Arthur have really enjoyed hearing you guys' perspective on things. For me personally, it's been broken. It was being broken in my thought process, being broken from within, being broken through addiction, being broken through just the camera. It's on, people can see. Being broken through recovery. So for me, it's through being broken, and in being broken, all I simply need to do is look to my wife and just know that she chooses to be married to me every day. She chooses to know me and to truly be naked and intimate and not ashamed. It's only by God's grace. I don't need to look very far. I personally feel that marriage for me personally is the greatest vehicle that God can use to keep me close to Him. It truly is such a transparent relationship of what does it mean to demonstrate grace? What does it mean to demonstrate mercy? What does it mean to accept grace? What does it mean to accept mercy? What does it mean to be transparent? What does it mean to ask for help? What does it mean to be broken? What does it mean to risk rejection but still live a life of integrity? All those things for me personally added up. I just need to look to my bride and I'm like, wow, it's on. This is a great example of what it means for me to know my mom mindset had changed about God, and really it's about me becoming smaller, not more, thinking less of myself and more of somebody else, thinking less of my feelings but more of somebody else's feelings, thinking less about how this is going to make me look but more of how this is going to impact them, dying to myself daily and opening up, looking at somebody else's perspective, inviting God into my heart daily so I can see how God has impacted somebody else's life. In doing that, it's like, wow, my whole brain has changed totally to a 180, and honestly, taking a lot of pressure off my shoulders of needing to be anything extra. And it's very freeing, and it's a lot of fun, and it's really exciting. It's like I can look like, God, I messed that up. I did that wrong. Teach me how to do that better next time, and walk with that and embrace that. So it's a great journey, but it has to go with that mindset of me thinking differently than I've ever had before.
Mm,
Yeah.
awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Nice. Now, so as you think about what we've talked about so far, we've kind of shared our initial experiences of God, how we've changed and transformed. So now I want to specifically ask you guys the question: how important is spirituality in your life? I mean, put another way, how has your faith impacted your life? That
Can I
makes
put my
sense?
hand up?
Was that? All right. We'll start with you. We'll start with you, Arthur J.
Okay, Mike. I think it's very important, and I know each of my brothers that's on the call, as well as yourself, Mike, will agree. Because when we talk about spirituality and we understand that we are truly spiritual beings and we're having a human experience, we are spiritual. So it's who we are. Now, when you don't know that, unfortunately, you live at a lower level than you've been destined to live, because it's as if you were created to take a full breath each breath, but you're taking a half a breath each breath, and it feels like life is suffocating. And it's not that life is not suffocating, it's just that the total air that was designed for you to express is not being expressed because you're not truly connected. So perhaps you're connected just on a mental level, because as I believe, we are spirit with a mind or intellect housed in a body. So when we understand where we came from and what's expressing through us, we can always, and we should always, be connected with that source. But we're never separated from it. I could have my lights off in my house, but there's still wiring to the house. And as long as the bill is paid, electricity flows. So as long as my belief in my creator is sound, energy flows. But when I began to doubt and despair, well, the energy is still flowing, but I just caused a blockage. And I think spirituality is what allows us to nurture that, to foster that, to cater that, so that becomes a creation in our life experience. And without it, we can't really have it, which is really, for me, the distinction between religion and spirituality. Because I think it was shared a week or so ago, I saw a statement that religion is borrowing somebody else's experience and spirituality is having your own.
Mm.
So religion may be trying to connect to your next door neighbor's electrical outlet instead of connecting to the one that's in your own house. So it's very important. It's key. It's central. We have to have it. Now, the packaging of it, I think, is what's going to be key as we seek to reach our brothers, because that is going to be key. How is it packaged and presented so that they understand? Because what we're talking about, and I just love to hear Jonathan talk, and him sharing about grace and mercy and how the denial of himself and how he shouldn't think more highly of himself and he should really look at the other person. Really, Jonathan is really just, I mean, we could be having a Bible study. I mean, he's giving scripture, but he's giving an interpretation of scripture that has the proper application for manifestation in our life experience. So he's given truth, he's given scripture, but it's palatable. We can understand it, we can grasp it, and we can apply it in our life experience, and we can see the very essence of God show up for us and show, I say, out through us in all that we do. So it's very important. I gave a long answer to perhaps a short question, but yes, it's very important.
Okay, Jonathan, so tell me, how important is spirituality in your life?
For me, the greatest investment I can ever make in my life is choosing to invest in a relationship with God daily.
Hmm.
So it's like working out. You know, I can work out for a couple weeks and look great and biceps start to come in and maybe get a few compliments. But if I stop right there, that's exactly where I'm going to stay. I'm really within 72 hours, they say, of working out, your muscles actually begin to diminish from whatever you've gained. So if I withdraw myself from my relationship with God based off of how it's working and what it feels like, then within a very short amount of time, creases in my foundation are going to begin to show up and be exploited through temptation, through making poor decisions, through my language, through my attitude, through the way I think about myself, through the way I think about other people. So I have to consciously, every day, 15, 20, 30 minutes a day, choose to pray, journal, read scripture, meditate on something every single day. If not, I am setting myself up, as well as surround myself with men who are going to ask me questions, hold me accountable, and challenge me to grow in a great way. If not, my my capability of making poor decisions, getting in trouble, making mistakes, like, did you really do that? Were you not thinking all those types of things come into play? And that's a gamble that I'm not willing to make. I've made that gamble before, and it cost me drastically. So for me personally, it's an everyday choice. It's a lifestyle. It's like waking up, putting my contacts in. I may say I see you, but if I don't put my contacts in, I'm not going to see you. It's waking up, brushing my teeth, lacing my shoes. I just got to do it. If I don't do it like that, it's like, man, you didn't even come ready to go to work today. You didn't even lace up your shoes. You didn't put no belt on. You didn't even brush your teeth. You just showed up. Then nothing's not going to get done. So I have to choose to consciously start my day off with inviting God into my heart, reading some daily bread, prayer, maybe having a prayer, maybe talking to somebody on the phone. Before I realize it, life happens. Live life on life terms and enjoy what the day brings, with the understanding that if I'm not with God, I risk a lot of pain that I cannot possibly handle on my own. So I need God in my life daily. That's the greatest investment I can ever make in my life. 401k, all that stuff, great. But invested in my life, my relationship with God, first investment, best investment I can ever make.
Got it. Now, Jay, do you have your laptop on your lap? Because your screen is going like this.
I do. My ADHD, man. I gotta keep moving. If not, I'll fall.
All right, Russell. So, Russell, how important is spirituality to you?
Oh, yeah, very, extremely. Things just work better when I'm aligned, and that's the word I use, is alignment. And I look at a couple of things. We have our psychological reality, we have our spiritual reality, and I can choose to operate purely from my psychology, from my ego functioning. But that I'm always going to be limited if I choose to operate that way, because my ego is basically just the sum total of my life events and my life experiences that have shaped how I think and what I know. What I've come to understand is that when I open the ego up to guidance from God, from Spirit, from the spirit realm, that I have access to all the information that ever was, and I can allow that to come in, and Arthur said it, into me, through me, and as me. And that is the key. And I can't tell you the amount of times when I've been doing something, if I'm working with a client or just engaged in any activity, where I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, or at least that's how it felt. And it was just a simple matter of getting myself out of the way, or maybe a better way to language that is opening myself up to higher wisdom and guidance. Give you an example, Michael. You know that I do shadow work, coaching. And I was doing coaching with the gentleman the other day, and actually I'm going through my certification process. And I'd kind of been away from the material for a while, and so before the process, I just got quiet and said this little prayer to myself, I open myself up to your guidance. And Russell didn't really know what the hell he was doing, but by opening myself up to that, and just being in the present moment of that process, things came to me that allowed me to go step by step. And at the end, the man said, "God, Russell, that was great. I had an awesome process. I really got a lot out of it. It shifted some things in me." And I said, "Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing the whole time." I was like, I probably shouldn't be telling you that. But that's often kind of how that works for me, is when I open Russell up, when I allow myself to be humble, that ego to realize, hey, you don't know everything. and that there is a greater source that can guide you through whatever it is that you're doing, then magic seems to happen. And so I think that's at the essence of this subject as it relates to men and spirituality. And it's a piece we haven't really touched on yet, was about the humility factor. And regardless of what religious tradition you're in, there has to be a certain level of humility when it comes to our ego, when it comes to our personal psychology, that allows us to say, hey, I don't know everything. I don't know how to do everything. You know, I don't have all the answers to everything. Let me humble myself and open myself up to the wisdom that can come from other sources. And so for me, that's what spirituality is all about. It is really about opening myself up and having an experience that's somehow greater than me. And in that experience, it expands me and it evolves me and it helps to mature me.
Yeah. You know, as a former atheist, I remember being what I like to call a conscious atheist, meaning I had taken some time to really question what I was taught. And in asking myself some of those questions, I recognized that it wasn't my truth. And so when I went through that period of atheism, I was completely closed to the idea that there was anything outside of me, other than me. I was just this really smart guy that, you know, could do a lot of stuff. But as grace would have it, I woke up to something grander. And Russell, I love how you interjected the whole humility piece, because what I have come to understand and know is that I of myself can do nothing. But that which is in me can do all things. And so by tapping into that which is in me, then I connect to the true spiritual essence of who I am. And so in answering the question, how important is spirituality, it's my life. It is everything for me, because it's how I choose to show up in the world. Because when I show up and, you know, I'm interacting with other people, then my spirituality, or shall I say, my actions are a reflection of my spirituality. If I'm acting out of love and compassion and sensitivity and caring, you know, those are all of my spirit, not of my ego, it's of my soul. And I believe that when we do the work and we connect with who we truly are, which I believe is spirit, then again our actions should speak louder than our labels and titles. And that's why I choose not to wear a label called Christian or Buddhist or whatever. I simply say that I am that I am. So this whole conversation is designed for you who are watching, just to challenge you to start thinking about your relationship to something greater than yourself. Don't get tied up into the, as Arthur said, the programming that you may have accepted as a youth. Ask yourself some deeper questions. Think about the dialogue that we've had on this particular episode, and ask yourself if you're willing to go deeper, because I believe there's always a deeper place that we can go. Russell mentioned that, you know, we can't know everything, but it's the journey, not the destination, that we should focus on. So with that said, and we obviously have all agreed that spirituality is an extremely important aspect of our lives. So now, man, I'd like for you, if you would, to share some things that you do that help you stay connected, that help you stay in touch with that spiritual aspect of who you are. Because it's great to talk about our experiences and share those things. And I believe it's important for you, the viewer, to hopefully gain some insights, but we want to share some practices, some actual things that you might not have thought of before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the panelists share some things that they do to deepen their spirituality. And so let's begin with Russell. Russell, what are some of the things, some of the practices you do that helps you connect and stay connected spiritually?
I'm glad you asked that question, Michael, because we can talk about spirituality all day long, but the idea is, how do we foster that? How do we go about it? And that's where, for me, spiritual practice comes in, because these are the activities, the behaviors that, for me, help me to transcend myself, that help to facilitate what I call a transpersonal or transrational experience, or give me a transpersonal or transrational experience or a mystical experience. And one of the things that I do, and honestly speaking, not as much as I have in the past, or would like to now, is meditation. And we've had several conversations about meditation over the years. I think it is perhaps one of the best forms of spiritual practices out there, or at least for me, I should say. So meditation is probably tops on my list. I always laugh when I say I go to church, because for years I was very anti-church. And what I came to realize is that I was just in the wrong place. And I had found the tradition that resonated with my soul and with my where I'm at on my journey. And who knows, maybe sometime down the road there's going to be another place that resonates with where I'm at then. But for me, going to church is definitely a spiritual practice. And that's a big part of why I do that, and as well as the fellowship and so on and so forth and all the other things that church offers. Prayer certainly is something that I do. I think that's a certain form of meditation depending on how it's done. I don't do a lot of fasting, but I have at different points. And another one of the big sources of spiritual practice for me is workshops and retreats. So those are kind of in my ballpark. I would even add psychotherapy, I think, is a form of spiritual practice, because it is about helping you to see yourself from a different perspective. And also, I think reading a lot of books, which I know you love to do, can be spiritual practice. I mean, if you look at, I know you can see on my bookshelf back here, there's a whole row, probably a couple of rows dedicated to books about spirituality, God, religion, and so forth. So those have been the vehicles that help me to stay open and in alignment.
All right, Jonathan, what's your practice? What do you do? How do you stay grounded spiritually? You touched upon it earlier, but go share that again.
Everything that Russell said is exactly what I do. So for me, it's about finding a way to organize those things so that I can apply them in a part of my daily activity. So to me, it's just like setting up a routine to go to the gym, or how you plan on eating your meal for the day, or when you plan on having breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So it's the way I start my day out and the way I try to go throughout my week. So my Sundays start my whole week. So it starts off with a staff meeting with my wife and I, and we map out together, starting out with prayer, on what we kind of have planned for our week, i.e., are you going to be in town this week, grocery shopping, or your needs being met, or my needs being met, things, just a real connecting conversation together. So for the first part, my house, my foundation, my wife and I, we have to be connected. That's a must. After that, Monday morning when I wake up, I always wake up with a scripture from my iPhone. and then I go into reading the daily bread, and then I read a little daily meditation book called Answers in the Heart that talks about addiction and recovery. And then I take a few moments, get my thoughts together, and I figure out what, through God and just listening and being quiet, what are my intentions are going to be for the day? What are my intentions for the day? And I send those out to 4 people and another group of people that I hold myself accountable with. And it may be like, my intentions today is to let go and let God and live life on life's terms. Or my intentions today is to take it one task at a time and to dance in the moment. Whatever the moment comes up for my intentions for the day. And then I probably have a verse that I try to meditate on, and I might, if I get stuck in a little traffic or the lady at HEB takes a little bit long with the deli meat or something, I might quote that verse in my head to keep me present in the moment. I carry a rubber band on my wrist, and whenever I begin to lose the present moment, I have a tendency just to kind of snap that to bring me back into the moment of being the power of now. We're right here, nothing else matters. And it just goes throughout the whole week. Maybe once a month on Thursdays, I try to meditate and smudge my house while I go through and just have like some stage, smudge out my entire house, and just really ask God to come in and just clean this house and make it a house, a temple, and just really put it a place that He's designed, a place of redemption and of love and everything that He would hope for it to be. And I do some Native American prayer. About once every other month, I meet with a therapist, and we just kind of line up my day, almost like going to a chiropractor, making sure things are going there. When we go to church, I'm in small groups. My wife and I are in a small group together, and I meet with a small group with a group of men of about 100. And I'm probably one of the youngest at 35, and the oldest is 93. And we meet every Thursday morning at 6:30. And right now we're going through Corinthians. And I meet with my pastor and another group of men at 12 of us on Friday mornings at 6:30 when I'm in town. And it may seem like, man, that's a lot of stuff to do. That seems like a lot of work and blah, 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 blah. If I want to grow, it takes work. It's just like working out. It's just like, working to save up to get a house. It's just like anything else. For me, it's not work. It's actually very rewarding, very peaceful, and I'm very connected, and I'm able to look a bit at this round table with you, man, today, and talk from the heart and be honest and be comfortable in myself and in my being. I'm able to, interact with something in life, lose my wallet, and talk about it with my wife and with my sponsor, and not allow it to make me go into a place of shame and guilt, but say, hey, life happens. Be a little bit more careful next time. Learn from your mistakes and cancel your cards, and they'll come again. And life goes on, and keep it moving. So these are the practices that I do that work for me.
All right, Jonathan, Mr. Arthur J. Practices. What do you do? How do you stay grounded? How do you stay spiritually connected?
The way I stay spiritually connected is definitely through prayer and meditation, and also I use affirmations as a part of that, and then study. Study is a big part of that, studying scripture as well as studying other spiritually related material. And I have one statement that I try to just repeat as a mantra throughout the day. And that simply is, I am one with God, and God is expressing through me and in me and as me. And that's just constantly on repeat. So it's always my desire is to allow the highest of God to be expressed through me. And I'm always looking for opportunities to serve in any capacity, whether it's giving a word of encouragement, whether it's a word of advice, whether it's just being present for someone, because once again, I am allowing God to express through me, and that helps me stay grounded. And I think, as Russell said, for me to get out of the way, to get that ego out of the way, so that the spirit that desires to flow through me and express through me as me can do that uninhibited by me. And when I allow that, things are perfect, and it just happens. And something that I've learned from you, Mike, along the way is about feeling and having that feeling from the heart space. And I have definitely journeyed more into just that experience of feeling the presence and just knowing by my feeling. And oftentimes, we hear gut feeling, or what's a gut feeling? Really, it's just you feeling the essence of God. And I've acknowledged it as that, and that has been a great benefit and an enhancement to my staying grounded. It's making sure that I'm feeling right. And if I know I'm feeling right, I'm feeling the essence of God, and I now act on that right feeling. So those are my practices that keep me grounded. And definitely connecting with brothers, like yourself. I think nothing really compares to the brotherhood, to the camaraderie that we share as men, and especially in this work. And I love how Jonathan said it is work. And if you want to have this holistic, healthy life experience, definitely from a spiritual standpoint, we have to develop in that area in regard, just like we would do the mind, just like we would do the body, because we're three-part beings. We're living on three levels of the life experience. And each and every one of those need to be in balance so that they can operate in harmony. And I love to talk about three-part harmony. And it only takes one flat to stop a car. And, if one of those areas in our lives, and definitely the spirit being the greater one, if it's not tended to and catered to, we're not going to be effective in the life experience. Because life is really there from the inside out.
Sure. Absolutely. So as I contemplate practices for deepening spirituality, Russell touched upon something that I really want to bring some attention to, because I know that, especially as men who happen to be black, there are so many stereotypes about us and our unwillingness to do this work, to really go deep. And that's why I've created Black Men Rock, is to provide a forum, a resource for black men to come to really go deep and go past the media-generated stereotypes. And so one of the things Russell said as a spiritual practice is, he said, psychotherapy. Mm-hmm. And I would suggest a powerful practice, if you will, maybe not a practice, but a process that all of us need to consider, is the whole idea of getting in touch with our emotions. Because I believe that, I know from my own personal experience, I was so disconnected from my feelings as a result of childhood trauma, yada, 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 that I couldn't feel anything, really. But what I've learned is, through going through the process of healing my heart, going through the process of dealing with my wounds, I have allowed myself to feel the essence of who and what I am. Mm. And it's difficult, if not impossible, to really feel that if we've got all those wounds. And so for those who are viewing this and you're thinking about spiritual practice, and maybe your mind automatically goes to God as this being outside of you, I would like to suggest that maybe that there's something in you that's divine, and you have to be willing to access that divinity. And as Jonathan said, it takes work, it takes effort. If you've watched this video, that tells me that you're committed to your own growth and development. And so what we're laying out here are some opportunities for your growth. And we offered some spiritual practices. And one of the things that I'm suggesting, again, is the willingness to get in touch with your emotional self. I think it's probably one of the most challenging things that men can do. But there are resources out there that can support you in doing just that. Russell happens to be a therapist who could definitely speak a little more on that, but we won't go there. But I just want to say that that's a form of spiritual practice that I know can help you live the life that you were born to live. and you have to be willing to go there, because I believe that's where the true freedom comes from. Because I used to process God up here. I used to process God through the rational, new thought thinking mode. You know, everything was great. I'm an optimist, you know, always happy and excited, but I was in denial because my heart was so wounded. And so I just want to throw that out there, if you're watching this video, that if you have not done your emotional work, I believe it's difficult to actually get to the spiritual. It's difficult, if not impossible, to really get to the spiritual. So be willing to do the work on all levels: emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and physical. And when you do that, you can and will live an extraordinary life. And that is the goal of the Black Men Rock Roundtable, is to provide you with insights and information and wisdom to support you in living an extraordinary life. Well, men, I think this has been a great conversation, and hopefully the men who are watching has benefited from it. And I now want to give you an opportunity to close with a final thought, whatever comes to mind that you want to share with the viewing audience in regards to spirituality and what we've talked about today. So let's start with you, Jonathan. Closing thoughts.
I would just say, just be you. It's not about being perfect. Just be who you are in the world, and understand that it's something out there bigger than yourself. For me, I believe in God, and that's what that thing is. Also, great topic. First time I've got the opportunity to meet Arthur, if I'm not mistaken. So very fascinated with the way he communicated and his journey, particularly starting with religion at such a young age, and then still having that yearning to grow and be open to understanding that the input and the output. I like that computer analogy. That makes perfect sense. Be safe out. Great topic for me. This is nourishment for my soul. This helps me gauge myself against the plumb line, making sure I'm living my life of integrity and accountability. And you guys, I look forward to hopefully being available for the next roundtable discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Russell, closing thoughts, sir.
Closing thoughts. And I have to reiterate something you just said. It's really, I think, the mind, and Arthur touched on it too, mind, body, spirit. And what I've seen in myself personally, as well as in many of the people that I've worked with, is we have to do that emotional and psychological work and free ourselves from a lot of those traumas and pains and blockages that live within us, so that we can then be open for that spirit to flow through us. I use the analogy of the chakras all the time. And whenever we experience some sort of trauma or difficulty in our life, it sort of blocks that channel. And to the extent that those issues aren't resolved, the channel is blocked. And what that channel does, when all of those different centers are open, it allows that spirit to flow through freely, uninhibited, as Arthur mentioned. And so I think it's really key to address that piece around psychology, so that we can develop the inner strength to have the humility to be able to open up to something greater. Mm-hmm. And so that would be my final thought on tonight, is really about opening ourselves up to have that experience of the divine, of that something greater, of that something bigger, of that something grander and vaster. It is extremely powerful. And if you haven't had a spiritual or mystical experience, set the intention to do it. And I can guarantee you that the universe will conspire so that you will feel that presence of God and have that experience, and it will change your life.
Dramatically. Thank you, Russell. Arthur J.
Yes, I would like to say I'm definitely benefited and blessed by all I've heard from Russell, from Jonathan, and definitely yourself, Michael. And just know that all that has been shared by each one of the brothers on the round table has served me well, and hopefully the listening audience has been served well by our discussion, because truly we are spiritual beings, and I love what was just shared um, by Russell and as well as you, Michael, concerning dealing with the emotional and the mental and getting those issues worked up, because they will create blocks, and the mind helping to be that conduit or that connecting link to the greater essence, the greater power that desires to flow to us and in us and through us. And as we heal those emotional wounds, we are able to allow that to flow. And this experience that we created, I think, allows for that possibility to be available for those that may be listening, and for those that are listening to know that God is much closer than you may think. He is as close to you as your very breath, the breath that you breathe in. And on a much deeper level, that's God that's really breathing you. It's not you breathing yourself. And I think when we come into that close alignment and relationship, we truly experience that oneness. And I call it the day of awakening, because Jesus himself said that, and on that day, you realize that I am in my Father and you are in me. And when that happens, it's that wholesome, holy connection I call the divine connection. And at that point, whatever comes, we are capable and well able to transcend, because we have now made that connection, and we have our source right there by our side. And we know that to be a fact, because that was the command that was given by Jesus himself when he said with his disciples, he said, you'll need to know what to say. And he says, but hey, don't worry about it. I've left a help for you that will tell you what to say. And here in the life experience, sometimes we need to know what to say and what to do and how to do. And we must know that there has been a source that's provided for us if we're just open to it. And it's always there. And it says that if we just ask, we'll receive. And if we just look, we'll find. And that's a law.
Thank you, Arthur J. And so I just want to close for the viewers. I want you to be courageous and find your own truth. It is imperative that you find your own truth. Don't just accept what you've been given. Don't just accept the programming, as Arthur mentioned. Be willing to ask deeper questions. Don't be afraid to ask deeper questions. And learn to trust your own heart. Learn to trust your inner wisdom. Because when you do, I believe that that wisdom will begin to guide you. And it'll take you exactly where you need to go. But you must first gain the courage to ask the question, what is my truth? My hope for you is that you find that truth. Because when you do, life takes on a whole new meaning. So this has been another episode of the Black Men Rock Roundtable. And again, I want to say thank you to my guests for sharing the wisdom. And for the viewers out there, I want to leave you with this thought. Arthur mentioned that he uses affirmations as a spiritual practice. And here's an affirmation that I've been using for probably 20 years. And that affirmation is this: every day, in every way, I keep getting better and better. That's my prayer for you. Every day, in every way, you'll keep getting better and better. We'll see you next episode.